If you've been looking at using AI to write your therapy progress notes, you've probably come across one of the earlier platforms, Upheal. Hi, I'm Dr. Maelisa McCaffrey, author of the upcoming book, Stress-Free Documentation for Mental Health Therapists, and today I'm giving you my full review of Upheal for writing your therapist progress notes. As we always do in this AI review series, we are going to look at 6 different criteria, and that's how it works, pricing, how does it integrate with your EHR or other record system, what are the cautions and concerns, what are my favorite features of the platform, and ultimately, how well does it write a progress note. Disclaimer, I am not affiliated with Upheal in any way. This is not an ad, and I've chosen not to get compensation for any of these AI platform reviews. This is my personal opinion and review, and I hope that you use it as one piece of information in your research to determine what platform and if a platform would be best for you. My other disclaimer is that anytime you're using an AI system in your private practice at all, use the AI rubric I have created for you to determine both, is the platform HIPAA secure and good for your practice, and also, does it save you time? Is it worth using? So click the link in the description below to check out the AI rubric, send us your name and email, and we will send that off to you right away. Okay, now that we have all the disclaimers out of the way, let's talk about Upheal. Firstly, how does it work? Well, the options you have for how to use Upheal actually depend on the type of plan you have or how much money you spend each month to use it. So for some of these things, you will need their upgraded unlimited plan. But out of the options, it offers almost all the ways to upload a note. So you can log into their system and record the session. You can upload a recording from another device. You can dictate your notes about the session. And you can actually use their Chrome extension to log into whatever other platform you're using to conduct telehealth sessions, and it will record the session that way and get the data from there. The one thing you can't do is upload like a transcript or actually type in your own notes. So once Upheal has all of that data, it will then analyze the data and produce a progress note in one of a variety of templates that it has available. They have their own default template. They also have SOAP, DAP, GURP, BURP, and an EMDR template. We'll talk about this later in the favorite features, but they do also have a mental status exam that's separate and an intake note that is separate. So once Upheal does all of its analyzing and synthesizing, you will get a lot of information. It not only gives you the progress note, but also an overview summary, and then it gives you a breakdown of all of the different topics with paragraphs that you could input into the progress note, or you can just use those topics for some other things we'll talk about later. It gives you a full transcript, and it also gives you what it calls notable mentions, which are random things it might pick out of the session that it feels is important. And lastly, it also has another section called People and Places. So it will highlight names that are mentioned or specific places that are brought up during the session. The cool thing about the transcript is that it does coordinate with the topics, and so you can actually search within the transcript and go to a specific topic rather than having to review the entire transcript to find something that you talked about. And I'm not even done yet. You will also get some analytics about the session. It gives you analytics on things like talk ratio, meaning how much did you talk versus the client, the cadence of speech, the topics that were covered, and like were they positive or negative, and different things like that. Lastly, there's also a treatment plan feature. So once you have written 3 notes for a client, then you can use those notes to create a treatment plan. I wasn't able to test out this feature. We'll talk about that in a minute because I had a couple of issues with uploading some things, and I'm not doing actual therapy sessions at this point, so it was a little more difficult for me to try that. But it sounds like a really promising feature. You might be wondering, how much is all of this information going to cost me? So let's talk about pricing. Now you can actually use Upheal for free for up to 15 sessions each month. So if you only want to use it for a few sessions, you could use it for free indefinitely. But once you get over those 15 sessions, it is $40 a month for up to 40 sessions, and that does limit you to the SOAP and DAP progress note templates. For $99 a month, you can write up to 140 sessions. You'll also get all of the other progress note templates and a lot of the analytics and insights. For $149 a month, you can do up to 200 sessions with Upheal, and it will give you that treatment plan option and also create things like SMART goals for you. Usually we skip over the next section because it's pretty quick, which is potential integration with your EHR. Now, Upheal does have a unique feature where you can use their Chrome extension and log into whatever system you already use for conducting sessions and use that to give Upheal the data for the session. So that's a really easy way to get Upheal the information it needs to write your progress note. Now, after that, you will still need to copy and paste it into your electronic health record or wherever else you keep your client records. There is an option to save and sign the note within Upheal, and so you could actually use Upheal as your progress note storage unit, but it is very limited as far as all of the other forms you would need and things that you would need signed by clients, like consent forms, authorizations to release information, letters you might want to send, etc. So as of right now, you can't actually use it as your electronic health record. So even if you sign and save the notes there, you'd have to have other client data in some other system. Okay, let's move on to my favorite features. A big part of all of this AI stuff is getting informed consent, and I do love that Upheal really emphasizes this point, and they do give you a policy that you can either just have clients sign through them, or you can use their policy to then create your own. It also does check to make sure that you have gotten consent from every client when you're doing a progress note. A lot of the analytics felt kind of like bells and whistles that you might not always need, but I could see a lot of the features being really helpful for supervision. So if you are training other clinicians, having the transcript and being able to jump easily to specific topics that were discussed within the session would be very convenient, as well as being able to see things like what was the tone of the session or who spent most of the time talking. And the breakdown of all of those topics and having them outlined kind of off to the side of what is shown to you as the progress note was really convenient and very well done. I also love that this platform does not make up information that it doesn't know. So for example, like on the mental status exam with appearance, it just leaves that section blank or it says not assessed. So it's letting you know you need to fill out that section. The AI couldn't tell that information just from hearing people's voices. Side note, it created a really good mental status exam. However, I don't personally believe you need a full and complete mental status exam in every single progress note. So for me personally, I wouldn't recommend even editing that section. I would just delete most of it for most clients most of the time. It's really helpful at intake, and it's really helpful for certain clients where you do need to track that level of detail. Otherwise, I usually recommend just look at mood, affect, and behavior. In most private practice therapy settings, that is what you're actually monitoring on a weekly basis. Okay, so back to talking about Upheal. You know I love a good bullet points section, and I love seeing bullet points in most of your progress note because they are easier to read and easier to write. In Upheal, it gave you the plan section all in bullet points, and they were really well written. So let's move on to cautions and concerns. When I was testing the feature, I did actually want to upload 3 different sessions so that I could test the treatment plan feature. However, I had things set up so that the computer could listen as I had the session going, and I was trying to be all quiet in my house so I could record it that way. And I couldn't get the recording to actually pick up. So that made me a little bit cautious, because if I were trying to record on my computer in my office, if I was doing a therapy session with a client, it wouldn't have actually recorded it. And the thing is, it did tell me it was recording, and it had the little red dot, and it actually stopped recording at a time that I had told it to stop. and then told me it was processing the note. So this whole time I thought it was actually working until I saw the progress note completed and it just said not assessed across the entire note. So that was kind of disappointing, and after trying that a couple different times and having that happen both times, I just went ahead and stopped and just used the original progress note that I had been able to upload as a recording. Now, as I've said with a couple of these other reviews, that could have been user error, but also I feel at this point I'm fairly tech savvy and it was telling me that it was working. So it's very likely something that could happen to someone else. So just something to be mindful of. And as usual, with every platform we have reviewed, it was a wordy note. It had a lot of words in it. They're big paragraph sections, except for that plan section with the bullet points. So I'd love to see the option to create bullet points or shorter phrases within different sections of the note. And I do have to mention that there were some pretty significant deficits in two of the sections that it gave me. That's the notable mentions and the people and places. The notable mention said that the client was pregnant, which was not only not true, but also pregnancy and anything related to it was never mentioned anywhere in the session. None of these other AI progress note generators have said anything similar, so I'm not quite sure how it pulled that information out of the session. And for the people and places, it just didn't pull out very accurate information, which was surprising because the topic sections actually were very well written. For example, in people and places, it identified as a therapist, and it did that twice. So there were two different types of therapists. And then the woman in the session, she's talking about her daughter, and the daughter's name is Pammy, and it identified Pammy, Tammy, and Pandy all as different people. It also made up another person, Amber, which again is not mentioned anywhere in the session, and I'm not quite sure how that came out. It did actually provide a little summary in that section that was relevant to the session, but why it related it to a person named Amber, I'm not quite sure. Now, those are all kind of extraneous, voluntary sections that are off to the side, so they're not automatically incorporated in your progress note, so it doesn't impact the accuracy. However, it's a little confusing, and hopefully if that is improved, it could be a usable feature. And as I mentioned, it also had the topics off to the side, which could be really useful. However, those were also very, very wordy, and there was some crossover among the topics. So I'd prefer to see, a succinct review that's only giving me the relevant topics that I need, rather than giving me 10 options for how to word 4 different things. But ultimately, how well did Upheal write the progress note? So I chose to write a DAP note to try to keep things consistent among the platforms. And the data section provided an excellent summary of the session. It was just a beautiful way to outline the entire session in one paragraph. I do think it's a little wordy for the needs of a progress note, but for a summary of a longer session, it was great. And the assessment section in the DAP note synthesized some pretty complex and deep psychological concepts in a beautifully worded way. And so I loved the ideas that were presented in the assessment section, and everything felt very relevant. In the assessment section, it also offered some criteria for a potential diagnosis that all was very on point with what was presented in the session and seems pretty accurate according to the DSM. Now, if you're using this to formulate a diagnosis for insurance, you would still need to check that and add some additional information in order to justify that diagnosis. But like I said, it offered a really great suggestion. The note also provided a pretty detailed risk assessment section, and I loved the way the phrasing was worded in the different sections. However, it broke the risk assessment down into 4 different areas, and I feel like it really could just be one statement. So again, with the wordiness of the general progress notes. The mental status exam, while again, I don't think you need to include a full mental status exam in every progress note, offered some really awesome insights, and I think I liked that better because it was broken down into just one sentence phrases. So you might be able to take some of that information and synthesize it into a very complete and thorough assessment. The plan section also offers some really great suggestions for following up, and it did translate the session, which is not CBT oriented, into more CBT sounding language, which could be useful if you're working with insurance companies and want to make sure that you're doing the translation to highlight what in the session or what you plan to do that is action oriented. It didn't talk about when the next session will happen, but neither did the therapist and the client in that session, so that does feel accurate. Now, at this point, you might be thinking, well, if those are all the sections of the note, Melissa, where are the interventions? And that's a great question because they weren't really there. This is a huge missing piece within this DAP template. There were a couple of statements about what the therapist did in that topics section off to the side. However, those statements weren't worded in a way that you would actually want to use in your progress note. For example, it actually said, the therapist questions whether or not her daughter would accept her if she knew the real her, which, if you know Carl Rogers, who was the therapist in this session, is absolutely not something he would say. What he was actually doing was reflecting back to the client a statement she had made to get more information from her and to prompt her to talk about it more. And in the context of watching the session, it doesn't feel odd and it makes perfect sense. So this is a great example of the note actually pulling out an accurate quote from the therapist, but not being able to read the context and therefore presenting it almost in a detrimental way. So as I've talked about with all of these AI platform reviews, you really do have to read the note in full and make sure you're checking what is in the note and that it is presented accurately. And if you want to use Upheal for your progress notes, you'll just really want to make sure that you add in some interventions or double check that it added a few of those interventions that you did actually do in the session into the appropriate place within the progress note. So what was my overall take on Upheal? Well, it did create some really great and insightful comments, like statements I feel like I never could have created on my own, and it offered an excellent summary of the session. However, it was a good amount of time to read through the note and pick out from all the information that's presented what was actually useful, what was accurate, and then also to add in what you might need to have in your note that's missing from the template that was provided. Personally, I think you could probably do that more quickly, having some starter phrases for yourself, some starter sentences, drop downs, check boxes, and a combination of all of those things. And I do talk about how to do that in another video that we will link to below. I'm sure you actually want to see these progress notes that were generated by Upheal, and you can. All you have to do is click below in the description, enter your name and email after you click on that link that will be identified there, and we will send you those progress notes along with my commentary on them. And make sure you're subscribed to this channel so you get notifications about any future AI reviews that are coming out. We will be continuing this series throughout the spring and summer, so keep an eye out and happy writing.